You're tuned into Leadership Beyond Burnout, where we encourage you and your organizations to heal, lead, and succeed. I'm your host, Dr. Kimberly L. Wilson. Welcome back to all of our fired up friends. And if you're new, listen for some of the actionable steps and challenges to integrate into your workplace and your life that our guest is going to share today. During the show, feel free to send questions to us or to our guest, and you can connect with us at drkimberlywilson.com. Now, today's episode is going to be sponsored by Leadership and Resilience Consultants, whose mission is to create healthy workplace cultures and reduce burnout by removing barriers, because we know that businesses and people thrive in these environments. Without further ado, let me introduce you to our guest today. Please meet Shannon Lee, a modern-day sage whose wisdom and fresh perspectives have made her a sought-after guide in navigating life's complexities. With a unique framework of thought, she helps individuals and organizations see the world through a different lens. Shannon is your compass to deeper understanding. She doesn't play by the rules, she rewrites them. With a fearless spirit and a determination to challenge the status quo, she leads the charge in faith-based and functional wellness while pushing boundaries and pioneering change. When chaos reigns in your body, mind, and spirit, that's where Shannon Lee thrives. She doesn't see problems, she sees solutions waiting to be unearthed. Now, with a knack for turning chaos into clarity, she is the go-to expert in preventive and regenerative medicine, delivering results when they matter most. She's a Navy veteran that self-healed from a 5-year battle with Gulf War illness. Now, this equates to multiple autoimmune conditions. Now, in a remarkable 60 days over 20 years ago, and has since been coaching thousands of people with chronic illnesses, not just back to optimal health, but supernatural health. During her 20-year alternative health career, she learned that your health is 100% mental and discovered 3 ancient supernatural secrets that keep people sick, tired, obese, and chronically fatigued, dumbed down, depressed, stressed out, and anxious. She passionately shares this message with people that are searching for more. And without further ado, let us bring on Shannon.
Hi, Dr. Kimberly. Thank you so much for that introduction.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to hear everything that you have to share. And I'm going to be a little bit of a student here because I don't know very much about regenerative medicine. So let's kind of start out with what you do in general to bring healing to this world.
Okay, well, that sounds good. What I do in general is I look past everything that they've done. So when someone says I have chronic fatigue or I have fibromyalgia, there's certain things that have brought them to. There's certain lifestyle choices, dietary choices that have brought them to where they currently are. Obviously, nothing happens overnight. You don't just wake up and, it might happen in one day where, wow, all of a sudden it's really affecting you. And then you go seek out some kind of help because you just can't live with it any longer or can't live with it at all. So really get down to the root cause. And when I say root cause, most people just look on the physical aspect of the root cause. Mm-hmm. And that exists, but there's also mental and emotional aspects that go along with that root cause that many people are not even aware exist. So it's my job to kind of dig in deeper and have that person dig in deeper for a better understanding of themselves and where that potential chronic illness, pain, whatever it is that they're dealing with, where that may have stemmed from, where did it come from? It's typically, comes from some kind of an emotional attachment, believe it or not. And a lot of people do not realize that. They don't even consider it.
Now, I'm curious if what you find initially is that there's this resistance to the other parts that aren't rooted to the medical basis, or even the how they react to the spirituality part of it.
Yeah, well, that's because it is different. Most people, as I said, don't even consider it. We're very based in our flesh, right? So when something's in pain, it's hard to get outside of, that pain, and think outside of that pain. So is there pushback? Yes, I would say that there is, but most people, I really, they're not going to, unless they're really at the end of their line and they happen to just come across me and like, it's really like a spiritual connection. You know what I'm saying? It's an energetic spiritual connection, which goes into resonance. So it's like, this is my message. This is what I'm putting out there, the energy that I'm sending out there, as far as, if you have this problem, if you resonate. And resonation is, it's an energy, right? It's a frequency. Okay, so Nikola Tesla, who's a very famous scientist, said if you want to understand how the universe works, you think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Mm-hmm. Most people, they get the energy part. Some get the vibration part, but they don't necessarily get the frequency part. And mm-hmm. musicians would understand it very well, because obviously, you're tuning at different frequencies. Well, we're tuning at different frequencies. Basically, we're receivers and transmitters, right? in essence, and we're putting out that message. So the message that I'm putting out, the people that need to come and that need to talk to me, that need to see me, that need to hear what I have to tell them, that's like, I say, like a God-given message, like, this is for you. It might not be for you because you're not ready to hear it, or it's just not for you at all. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I don't make that decision. I just do I just put the message out there, and that's my job. And then once someone responds to that and they go, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Tell me a little bit more. And then we start, this relationship, and start talking and learning about that person, and some of the things, their beliefs, their limiting beliefs, and some of those things that you mentioned, in the introduction, those things that keep people stuck, where they're at. And limiting beliefs is a huge one. The second would be your born identity, and a third would be unforgiveness. So all of those things are having an impact on your life, and you don't even realize that they are. They're keeping you, in some way, shape, or form, in this box, and you'll go around that box. You ever feel like you're going around the same mountain a few times? Right. It's that analogy, so to speak. You haven't seen the light of what you need to see. You haven't learned the lesson, and it's coming back around to show its ugly face. That's also part of resonance. Mm-hmm. But once you get past it and you learn from it, then you can move up, higher, in a higher resonance, and kind of push that stuff away from you, because the higher you are in resonance, the less you're going to have the lower type energies affecting your life.
And so one of the reasons that I really wanted to have you on here is because I definitely believe that there is a disconnect when people begin to think about burnout and how our body is doing in our mind, and how all of that works together holistically. So definitely wanted to bring that to the audience. But I'd also love for you to share some definitions, especially of energy, because what I tend to hear mostly in common everyday language is energy in terms of oh, she brought that negative energy. And that's the surface level definition. Energy is an attitude. It's either positive
Sure.
or negative. So I'd love for you to bring a little more depth to that, as well as resonance, so that everybody can be on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, there's definitely that surface level, like you're talking about positive vibes or negative vibes, you know what I'm saying? And that's kind of a generalized, you know, of look of it, so to speak. When you really get into energy and frequency and the vibration, you know, there's two very distinct energies and frequencies, so to speak. So, of course, you have hate. And I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Emoto, and we're speaking about the water. And the water is, they say the body keeps the score because the water in the body is like, has the silicon and it holds the memory. And so Dr. Emoto was a Japanese scientist, and he did many experiments people are familiar with. But one very prominent one was he took a jar of water and he put on the outside of it love, and on the other one he put hate. And the water that had love was beautiful, and it was clean, and it was vibrant, and it was just glowing. And I don't remember the time period. I want to say it was like 7 days or something like that. And the one that said hate was just nasty and degraded. And all of these, you know, it was like you would imagine. So it was a very powerful experiment to show what that energy between love and hate does. And really, love and hate are not total opposites.
Right.
Fear is actually the opposite of love, right? But hate is just a kind of a sister, so to speak, or ugly cousin of fear. So, but it was just so profound, and so that energy that you're bringing, what you just in a general thing, how you take everything in life, is life working for me, or is it working against me, or
Mm-hmm.
what's, you know, what's going on there. And so bringing those, you know, no negative vibes kind of thing, you know, that takes it a little bit deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's, even though that's the surface, it's still saying something, because that energy is going to affect the whole group, right? Why do they say like one bad apple spoils the bunch, right?
Right.
Because it's true. It's so, we live in such a negatively driven, our language is very negative. No parking, no, no, don't do this, don't do that, right? Everything
Right.
is very negatively based. So our brains are driven that way. And you really have to make a conscious effort to not see things like, oh, like this happened to me, and this is like the end of my life, or, you know, that happened to me. Did it happen? Maybe it happened for you. Like, oh, you're running late and you're like just stressed out because now, who knows, like you're making this whole thing up in your mind. Like, what can
Mm-hmm.
happen because I'm late, or I've done this, or I've done that. And you can work yourself up into a frenzy over absolutely nothing, and be
Right.
like, okay, you know what, maybe you just missed getting hit by a car, or maybe, you know what I'm saying? So
Right.
even though it might be frustrating at the time of it happening, and it probably is because things aren't going the way you want them to go,
Mm-hmm.
but when you bring that faith base in, you understand it's not about you
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, um, and everything is working for you. And so that belief right there changes your whole perspective, so you don't get that stress, because that stress brings on more stress, and it brings on, you know what I mean, it's like a snowball effect of negative, until you just like stop. And it has a whole physiological effect as well,
Right.
because once you get that stressed out feelings, you know, your cortisol is already there. Basically, if there's any kind of stress in your body, cortisol is being released on a lower level. But then if it gets heightened, then you start looking at adrenaline, which is really the damager, and then aldosterone, and the whole combination of it literally puts you in that. It changes your endocrine system from rest and digest to fight or flight.
Right.
So, and that's a switch. And what's difficult with humans is because we have eyes and a memory, it's hard to switch back out of that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you see a deer or antelope getting chased by a lion, and he outruns him and goes back to grazing in the field. Yeah, is he looking? He might look around to see if there's any like known predators. If he doesn't see anybody, he goes back to grazing. Mm-hmm. But we keep that. We store that, whatever that stress is in our cells, and we have to switch back to the rest and digest. And that doesn't always happen easily, because it can just build upon itself all day. And then that's part of that burnout process.
So I'd really love to hear your take on a leader or someone on a team not regulating their emotions and experiencing some of that. They're having all of these symptoms and they're unhealed. How does that energy impact the team, the organization?
Well, that's a really good question. So there's, interestingly enough, when people think of the word contagion, they think of a virus, right? Mm-hmm. And it can be a virus, but it can also be an emotion that's felt through a group of people. And we have these hormones, right? And that's what those stress, they're stress hormones, right? Cortisol and aldosterone and adrenaline, they're hormones, and they're very, very powerful. And so it can just easily trigger, the next person, and they get caught up in the emotions of it if they allow themselves to. And they can easily get worked up. And that's why you see, mobs and, things like in gangs and things like that happen, because they're all, working off that usually adrenaline at that point. And it kind of just explodes from there. But once it's done, then it's kind of like mm-hmm. you're almost exhausted, because it's put your body in such a way, in such a physiological way, where it's just like, it's tiring, and it can be stopped, but you have to you have to literally mentally stop it on your own. Your flesh won't want to do that. It goes completely against what the flesh wants to do. Mm-hmm. The flesh wants to feel it out, right? And go through it all. But in order to have the balance, you have to stop it in the mind.
Mm-hmm. So that I love that you mentioned it as a contagion, because you can often, and especially in the military, with us both having a military background, and you see, sometimes you might see a toxic workplace culture, and it's interesting. it's so interesting how when service members get in a position of leadership, some want to lead and some want to serve, and then others are like, well, it was rough for me, so I'm going to make it rough for you, and they continue to carry out some of that negative energy, negative behavior, and it just kind of continues to pass on. It's like you said, like it stores in the body, and then it's just waiting to release it on the next new innocent person.
Yeah, trained through pain, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any burnout moments?
I've burnout twice in my life. Yep. The first time was the physical, as you have mentioned in your introduction, was from Gulf War illness, because I had been in during the Gulf War time period, and we were exposed to various external and internal factors, vaccines, and burn pits, and depending on where you went, if you were overseas or on a boat or whatever it was that you were doing or were exposed to environmentally could have played some kind of role in that illness. And apparently over 300,000 plus veterans still suffer from that.
Wow.
20 years later, 25 years later. So thankfully, I went on a different path, and but it was basically, as you mentioned, a combination of autoimmune diseases. It was chronic fatigue before that was even a diagnosis. It was fibromyalgia before that was even a diagnosis. I had IBS. I had prediabetes. I had ridiculous anxiety, bouts of depression, and of course, PTSD. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know what I didn't know. But I went to the VA, the doctor, like we all do, right? Because that's what we're told to do. So I went there and,
got some ibuprofen?
No. Yeah. Well, no, they didn't even offer me that. No, they took all my tests and they said, well, we got good news and bad news. And the good news is all your tests are great. Your liver enzymes are perfect. And you have wonderful blood work. Wow. So what's the bad news? It's all in your mind. It's all in your head. And I didn't get it at that time. I was like, what are they talking? No, it's not. And they offered me Prozac. And I was like, I'm not taking Prozac. Like, that's not what we're talking about here. So I declined that, but it's really interesting. So how life brings you in different directions. And I went to Houston and I got a job with a company that was the largest Ayurvedic medicine supplement company in the world, basically. And their products were phenomenal. And so they had 12 retail stores in the greater Houston area. And my partner, who was my best friend, and she was working at one of the stores, got me onto one of the stores, and we were taking their products in copious amounts, like pharmaceutical strength. And so within about 60 to 90-ish days, somewhere in there, I say like 90 to 95% of my symptoms all disappeared.
Wow.
And I felt amazing. And I felt like I should feel at 28 years old, right? Or 30, whatever I was like 28 to 32-ish. I was young, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I felt like I should, the energy you feel like you should have at that age. And so that was great. But again, I still didn't know what I didn't know. What I knew was those products worked. And I knew it was a synergistic, the reasons that they worked was because some of those constituents can actually chelate some of the really heavy metal toxins out of your body. They can change there was anthrax in those shots that we got as Gulf War veterans, which is never good. It was determined in 1986 that it was deadly to the human body. So unfortunately, there were a lot of Army guys that got a lot of anthrax, and it does cause IBS and all kinds of other gastrointestinal issues, and that's not good because so you have a couple different brains in your body. The first is in your head. You have brain cells. Literally, you have brain cells in your heart.
Yeah, and
you have they say your gut is like another brain. Okay. So so it's interesting, and you really have to serotonin is created. The most serotonin is actually created in your gut. So so that was the first time, and that was amazing. And I just went on this path of learning alternative, different alternative healing and protocols and for different things, and was consulting people, obviously offline at that time for a very, very long time. And then it was actually not until 2000, I think it was 17 or 18 was when I learned that it was actually Gulf War illness, because I'd never heard that term until I came upon a report of findings that had been documented from the doctors that had put the vaccines together, and they had released 20 years later what was actually in those vaccines. So now all of a sudden it made sense. And so, which was great. So I was like, wow, well, every veteran needs to know this. They need to have
it's not in my head.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't in my head and it's not in your head either. And we didn't know that that there were other people. They make it seem like you're the only one that's having this issue, you know,
Right.
and that
Right.
wasn't true. But then again, before I even learned that in 2014, I had gone through another, which was more of a mental and emotional burnout because of a family situation, with my son, dealing with someone that has not an actual diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, but certainly had those traits
Mm-hmm.
and syndromes, so to speak. And so dealing with them and having a child with that person, which eventually led to them legally stealing my child,
Wow.
you know, and kind of going through this whole legal battle with the father of my child. And so it eventually he stole him, and from the time he was 3, and I've never seen him since. So at that time, I mean, obviously that was not,
Still to this day?
still to this day. Mm-hmm.
Why?
Yeah. So I just, that was obviously very difficult to deal with,
Yeah,
um, because
I
they
can't
made it,
imagine.
no, you couldn't, you really can't imagine. And on one story, there's so many women that and men too. I can't just say it's a one, it depends on the situation. It depends on the state that you're in, but it's happening all over this country. And until you step in that, um, pile of mess that's the family courts and all of that stuff, you have no idea like what's going on. But people using their children as, you know, weapons against the other people and that kind of thing. But it was
And then
devastating.
you still have to work.
You still have to work. You still have to function. I mean, the grief. So you
Yes.
want to talk about, so other emotions, it's the grief, the anxiety, regret, again, bitterness and hatred and all of these things. And so not knowing what I knew about energy, not wanting that to all like come against me and affect my body
Right.
in a negative way. This was where the faith part came I mean, it was always there. It's always been
Mhm.
there. I've been, quote unquote, as you say, saved since I was a young child, but really like digging in and following, following my Savior and learning who He is and what He really is about, and why. Like, why does all this happen? Like, I don't you cannot wrap your head around it,
Mhm.
because there's nothing, you go, what could I have possibly done? But you didn't have to do anything. You don't have to do anything. It's just, there's so many factors that I say that you don't see that play a role into it. And the reason that the spiritual aspect and that faith-based aspect is so important was because He covers all things even before you were born. So that was what was really profound, because I know all these things. There's the subconscious mind, so to speak, which starts at about 6 months in the womb, goes till you're about 7 years old. This was the reason that Hitler said, give me a child and I'll show you the man, because that's the computer.
Mhm.
That's the programming. So all this stuff happens to you while you're becoming individualized, so to speak, and you're taking in all this information around you, right? And you've got these people in your life, and they say things to you or do things to you or whatever, and it's all coming at you, and you're just kind of taking it in. And there's, what kind of response, how do I, and some of it's can be really negative. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, depending on who's around you, if it's your mother, it's your father, your sister, your brother, whomever it is, but or a friend or whatever. And if they're saying, oh, you'll never be anything, or you'll never do anything, or and they're constantly putting you down, or and not building you up, that's something you get in your head, and that's part of those limiting beliefs that we were talking about. But you don't even know, like, it was put there, and you don't even realize, like, 40 years later, it's still there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I
Because
always talk about that mean girl that so many women have sitting on their shoulder, or who are
right.
demeaning them on yourself. And even in the language, and someone gives you a compliment and you say, oh, it was just this. It's no big deal.
You play it down.
Yeah,
Right.
I just decided to do my hair today. And, we put ourselves down.
Yeah, all the time. But don't do that, because there's so it's there. You don't even know it's there, and it is a problem. It is keeping you stuck. And then what's coming out of your mouth is also very powerful energy, right? So people are so, you know, loose with their language now, and the English language again is a very negative language. And then there's so much that's going on with that, to say, like, you can, whatever you're speaking, you can be prophesying your future. So don't say, like, oh, this is killing me, or this is, that would be the death of me. Don't say those words, because, or, oh, I'm just sick of this, or I'm sick of, don't say those words, because you're inviting that. It's an energy, right? It's a frequency. You're inviting that to yourself. You're opening a door, so to speak, a portal, in a sense. And there's actually even specific words in our language that are the names of demonic entities. You don't even know that you're speaking, but it opens a portal for them to come in. And they have to have your,
Permission.
yes, in a sense, approval, your permission, your agreement, your consent. And you allow that by the things that you wear, the things that are in your house, certain books that you might read. There's so many portals. And you think that, this should be benign, like nothing, you don't know. There might be a book that's really got a benign title, but you don't know what that book is about. You don't know who the author was. You don't know what they were doing, when they wrote that book. But you take things like, okay, let's talk about some of these movies, like The Shining, you know what I'm saying? Or like those crazy kind of movies that are out there, where you're putting all that into your energy field, so to speak. And that's what you see, it gets in there. Those are things that you really can't forget. You know what I'm saying? So it's really important, to keep your energy as high as you possibly can. Speaking words, and we're talking about the words that we say, things like DE that start with, like, if you decide something, those are actually negate the word. So people don't even realize, like, when you get down to linguistics, it's literally that minute of energy that can have an effect on things. It's a culmination, you know what I'm saying, of things. So just what you're speaking, be careful what you say. Your words are really powerful.
So are there any words that you would say people absolutely, like, the top three that people should avoid? I hate to sugar all
Well,
over people, but that's
yes. Stop saying you're sick and tired.
okay.
Stop saying, oh, that kills me.
Oh, love you to death.
And yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one.
But I
Or
stole like,
that would be the death of me, right?
oh, okay.
Yeah.
I gotta
So you
consider
really,
that. Wow. So you're
yeah.
saying that they're really creating setting the table for that condition to
Correct.
exist.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Um, it's all having an effect, and it's all brought into, you could say, the psyche. Um, yeah.
And I think if I were to, for those audience members who are just like, this is getting a little too deep for me, I'm not sure. Let's bring it down to the level of when you're about to do something really important, whether it's give a speech, do a training, test for something. We often will say, okay, you can do this, you got this, it's okay. Or you might jump up and down to get pumped up. So it's the same principle, I assume.
Same principle. Yes. And you know what's really important? That kind of brings us to kind of a, so to speak, there's those three things that I talked about. So the limiting beliefs, the born identity, that's a big one, and unforgiveness. But part of what you just said is the manifestation. So when you have something that is big, if it's a speech or, and people kind of pump themselves up in that way, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. What you want to do to really make it stick is what's called the heart and the mind cohesion. It's a heart and mind resonance. So that what you want to manifest, your heart has to agree with your mind. So it's kind of the secret to the secret.
Okay.
That nobody tells you about.
I
So
would love a demonstration.
I call it the flaw of attraction,
Okay.
is that no one really tells you how that actually works, because you can meditate, you can affirm affirmations over and over, but there's you really have to be consistent, very, very consistent. And all those things are good for building yourself up and building a beautiful life and a healthy, picture of yourself. But when it comes to actually manifesting what you want, if you have to be it before you'll actually see it. So we talk about money, right? Or we talk about health. It doesn't matter if you want to have $1 million, but you came from not $1 million, right?
Yeah, that's an easy way to say it.
Right? You came from just average America, but number one, you have to really believe. It's not the believe I can win the lottery, because you know you could, but the statistics on that are not in your favor. So believing like you are the lottery, it comes from within. And so you have to feel that self-worth, whether you have it in your bank account or not. And some say that's a fake it before you make it, but it's not quite the same. You really have to truly feel it. You have to feel it with every sensation that you have in your body, in your mind, in your spirit, and you have to make decisions as if you already have that money. You already have that health that you want. Whatever that thing is that you want, you have to make decisions that, as that person, you would be that person, right? In those shoes. How would you act if you were that person in those shoes? What are the things that you would do on a daily basis? What are the choices that you would make? That's where you have to be in order to actually get there and bring those two.
Mm-hmm. So, what does that look like when you say consistently? So, I'm trying to think of the questions that people are at. So, consistently, is it 3 days? Is it 5? Is it 20? 60? What?
Well, it's until it becomes a reality, right? Because the energy, if that's something that you really, truly, truly want, and remember, you're going to bring to you what you focus on,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you focus, there's nothing wrong with that visualization. Once you have that visualization, bringing yourself to what that would actually look like, and bring yourself in a day-to-day kind of feel. And you do it as often as you need to. And your, what do they call, your people in the energy world would say like, oh, your higher self. But I just say your spirit, your true essence of your spirit will work, and the Father will work with you to bring those things into your life, to bring you in the direction that you want to go, because he wants to give you everything that you want. He truly does. You know, he's, as we would imagine, a good father. If you were a good father or a good mother, you really want to give your kids everything they want. You don't want them to be spoiled, but you would spoil them righteous, right?
Okay, so what does your burnout recovery routine look like that just continually gives you energy, or how you stack it as a and
Yeah.
real, or where do people start?
Yeah. Well, you have to start. You have to start with the limiting beliefs and identifying where those limiting beliefs are. Where did they come from? Then you have to understand your born identity. And the born identity is, it's as opposed to your birth identity. Your birth identity is Shannon, you know, Lynn Lee. It's that three name, corporate name is what we call it. It's the corporate name. Okay, so
Okay.
you were birthed on this day,
Okay.
right? And so you're military, so you can kind of understand supply, right? And how things work in supply. We have nomenclatures, which is the name, right? And that nomenclature has usually not just a name, but also a serial number that goes along with it. And so, and then it has like some kind of piece of paper along with it, right? So we would be that same, it's that military industrial complex kind of thing that was created back in the Roman Empire that gives us the system that we have today. So we're going really deep, but it's that born identity and recognizing that that is actually separate. The flesh body, it's a corpse, from who your true self is, who you truly are. And when you have that faith-based identity and you have a savior that you know and believe died for you because of a original sin, which sin is a falling away, you know, from the Father. And when you believe in that and that they died for that sin because it was original, it's not something you've done, although certainly I have sinned. If you go by the law, you know, who hasn't, like, you know, stolen a paperclip or a pen or, you know, whatever that sin might have been if you go according to the law. But thankfully, because I am saved, I don't live by the law, I live by grace. And under that grace of who I call and recognize and understand as Christ Yahusha, that's a whole nother topic for a whole different day, where most people would say Jesus. But because my identity is in him, so it's when he died on that cross for your sins, you died with him. And so now that he was raised up, you're raised with him, and you also sit at the right hand of the Father as a co-heir with him.
So how does
So
that
that's the
work with people who have an alternative faith like Buddhism or Hinduism? Uh, does
yeah,
the
that's
type of
a challenge.
regenerative medicine work in that with that as well? Or
It's going to
what
be
would
a challenge for those people because they don't, there's a belief system like Hindus. It's multi gods, right? Little gods. And so there's the god of this or the god of that. And those are, um,
it would
I
be a
say,
challenge in the system that you
it,
use?
it would be a
Mhm.
challenge for sure. Yeah,
Okay.
this is definitely, you know, people faith based in what I would say.
Christianity.
I would say technically would be Christianity.
Okay.
Um, Essentially, yes. Or people that believe that they are part of the body of Christ, not necessarily. Because Christians technically are Catholics, and a lot of people don't know that. And I'm not Catholic, but I have what I consider a personal relationship with my Savior, with the Father, who was the creator of all things. So yes, it would be a challenge for people that are Buddhist and Hindu and any other faith that doesn't recognize the Savior for who he is and what he did.
And as we close, is there any challenge that you would like to offer to individuals or organizations to move forward and have a healthier lifestyle?
Yeah, I would challenge them to, um, consider everything that I've said, consider, you know, who they are and really what the Father and what Christ Yeshua has done for them specifically. And if it was just them, if it was just me, he would have still done it. So um, that's how, and that kind of is a good point to leave on. It's the final piece of that is the love. It's the love. So because who would do that? Who literally would lay down their life for you? Not many people, right? If any. And so, um, so whether you recognize him or not, he knows you. He knows every hair on your head, every cell in your body knows exactly. You were technically born before the angels were even created, which means you are older than creation. Like, he knows who you are. You just have to know who you are in him. Having that revelation, um, you know, your birth was a manifestation of that creation, right? But your born identity is in him, and having that perspective changed everything for me for the mental and emotional breakdown, because it took it off myself. I couldn't help myself. I couldn't do anything to get my son back. It was like my hands were tied behind my back, and there was nothing I could do. And so I had to let it all go. He's not dead, he's alive, but I have he doesn't recognize me as his mother. I mean, he knows I'm his mother, but we don't have that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't know me. And I had to let that all go. And as the years have gone by, I've had to let that all go. It was
Right.
probably, the hardest thing I ever had to do.
Yeah.
And I said, he was my only son. I was 40 when I had him. So, when I was struggling with that, I had to go to the Father. And I was like, but look, it's my only child. I have no
Right.
other children. And he said, I think I know a little bit about giving up your only son.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah, I get that. But so I have to give it to you because it's beyond me. So I let it all go. And the enemy will try to bring it back 100 times over in so many different ways. And even to this day, if I'm witnessing, a young boy's birthday party,
Yeah. That would be tough.
But yes. But it's okay because he's still in control and I don't have to know everything. All I know is that he's in control and that's all that matters. And his grace is sufficient. So let go. And that's where forgiveness comes in. And ultimately, the most important, what do they say, law of the New Testament is to love.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that was a very vulnerable moment to share all of that. And I hope that you continue to find the peace that you've been able to have somewhat. Deep breath.
Yep. Yes, that helps. For sure.
Yes. Well, thank you so much again for being here today. And I'll put in the link how you can follow Shannon. And until next time, Shannon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kimberly.
You're welcome. You've been watching Leadership Beyond Burnout. I'm your host, Dr. Kimberly L. Wilson. You can find us here every Thursday from 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 2 p.m. Pacific Time here on E360 TV. Until next time.